Sobrang di ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta at sana patuloy yung suporta niyo sa
Said it many, many times. Nobody in this world, Russian athletes or Belarusian athletes, support the war. Nobody. How can we support the war? Nobody.
What is going through your minds right now?
I'm so blank. I'm thinking.
Explosive. When the queen spoke, the entire tennis world had to listen. Sabalenka's bombshell defense, the fan war that's dividing Asia, and the prodigy who might be losing her magic. The silence in that press conference room was deafening. You could have heard a tennis ball drop. For days, maybe even weeks, the entire tennis universe had been walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room, whispering in corners, but never saying out loud what everyone was thinking. The tension had been building like a pressure cooker about to explode, a toxic cocktail of social media warfare, locker room politics, questionable officiating decisions, and the kind of uncomfortable silence that tells you the people in power are hoping if they just ignore it long enough, maybe it'll all go away. But then Aryna Sabalenka, the reigning world #1, the woman who hits tennis balls harder than most of us hit our alarms on Monday mornings, finally stepped up to the microphone. And what she did next changed everything. She didn't dance around the question. She didn't give us one of those carefully crafted, legally vetted, personality-free responses that athletes are trained to deliver. She didn't smile politely and deflect. Aryna Sabalenka looked directly into the chaos and chose a side. For words. Just 4 simple words that landed with the force of one of her signature serves. She's not wrong. That was it. That was all it took. In that single moment, the narrative didn't just shift, it exploded into 1,000 pieces. The establishment's carefully constructed wall of denial cracked wide open, and suddenly everyone had permission to say what they'd been thinking all along. What started as one young player's frustration against a system that seemed designed to keep her in her place has now transformed into something far more dangerous for the tennis authorities. This is a full-blown revolution. This is player solidarity at its most powerful and most rare. When the queen of the court publicly backs the rising princess of the Philippines, when the woman at the very top risks her relationships with tournament directors and officials to defend someone still fighting for her spot in the top 50, you know something fundamental has shifted. The fans noticed immediately. Social media went absolutely nuclear. Officials suddenly found themselves having very uncomfortable conversations. And players across the entire tour are quietly reassessing where the real power lies when the sport's biggest voices decide to use their platforms to protect the underdogs. Welcome to the new era of the WTA, where the old rules don't apply anymore, where staying silent is no longer the safe play, and where a single comment can ignite a firestorm that burns across continents. This isn't just about a disputed line call or a questionable overrule anymore. This is about respect. This is about fairness. This is about who gets to have a voice in this sport and who gets told to shut up and be grateful. And today, we're going deep, deeper than anyone else dares to go, into the scandal that's shaking the foundations of women's tennis, the rivalry that's turning into an all-out fan war between 2 Asian superpowers, and the young prodigy whose sudden crisis has everyone asking if the pressure finally became too much. Let me take you inside the story that everyone's talking about, but nobody fully understands. Let me show you why Sabalenka's 4 words might have just rewritten the entire power structure of professional tennis. Let me explain why the next match between certain players might require security usually reserved for heavyweight boxing matches. And let me reveal why one of the sport's brightest young stars might be facing the biggest crisis of her career. This is Champions Tennisitics, and buckle up, because this is going to be one wild ride. To truly understand the earthquake that Sabalenka just triggered, we need to rewind the clock and understand exactly what she was responding to. The tennis news cycle moves at lightning speed. A new controversy every day, a new drama every week. Yesterday's scandal already forgotten by tomorrow's headline. But some wounds don't heal just because we stop talking about them. They just fester beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to burst open. And the controversy surrounding Alex Ila hasn't healed. Not even close. It's been sitting there, covered with the thinnest of bandages, and everyone involved has been pretending it's fine while infection spreads underneath. For the better part of the last year, Ila has been navigating the absolutely treacherous waters of the top tier of women's tennis, And if you've been paying attention, really paying attention, you've noticed a pattern. She keeps finding herself on the wrong side of what officials like to call interpretation when it comes to line calls. Overrules, and all those little moments where an umpire's decision can completely change the momentum of a match. Now, before anyone accuses me of conspiracy theories, let me be clear. I'm not saying there's some organized effort to keep Ila down, but I am saying that there's a tale as old as tennis itself, maybe as old as sports in general. The rookie gets squeezed. The newcomer gets the tough calls. The established players get the benefit of the doubt, while the young upstart has to prove herself twice as hard. It's not written down anywhere. It's not official policy. But ask any player who's fought their way up from the qualifiers, and they'll tell you. The game is different when you're not part of the club yet. But here's where Ila is different from most young players trying to break through. She stopped accepting it quietly. After her absolutely historic run to the Miami Open semifinals last year, a run that included taking down the then world number 2 in a match that had the entire tennis world gasping, Ila decided she had earned the right to speak her mind. Her recent comments about the double standards in officiating, about how certain players seem to get every close call while others have to win despite the officials rather than with their help, were seen by many insiders as a dangerous move, a career-limiting move. Because here's the unwritten rule in professional tennis: you don't bite the hand that feeds you. You don't criticize the system while you're still fighting to establish yourself in it. You wait until you're untouchable, until you've won multiple Grand Slams and banked enough money that you can afford to burn some bridges. You certainly don't speak out when you're still outside the top 50, still dependent on wild cards for some tournaments, still proving that you belong in the conversation. The backlash was swift and predictable. Entitled, arrogant, too much too soon. Who does she think she is? The critics crawled out of every corner of tennis media. Former players who never had to deal with social media criticism during their careers suddenly had very strong opinions about young players who don't know their place. Anonymous sources, and we all know what that means, other players who are too cowardly to put their names on their opinions, started whispering that Ila was difficult, that she was developing a diva reputation, that she needed to learn some humility. The establishment circled the wagons. The pressure was applied. The message was clear: apologize, walk it back, learn your place, or watch your career opportunities start to dry up. Her Australian Open campaign ended in the round of 16 with a straight sets loss to Alina Svitolina. Now, for any normal 18-year-old player, reaching the 4th round of a Grand Slam would be cause for celebration. That's a fantastic result. That's building blocks for a successful career. That's exactly where you want a teenager to be in their development. But Mira Andreeva is not a normal 18-year-old player. She won 2 WTA 1000 titles last year. She reached the semifinals of the French Open. She was ranked world number 5. She was being discussed not as a future champion, but as a present-day contender. The expectations weren't just high, they were astronomical. So a 4th-round loss isn't a success. It's a disappointment. It's a regression. It's evidence that something has gone wrong. But here's the thing: the loss itself isn't the real problem. Players lose matches. Even the greats lose matches they should win. What's concerning is how Andreeva lost. The manner of defeat. The way she seemed unable to find solutions when things started going wrong. The way she appeared to shrink under pressure rather than rise to meet it. And one man, one of the sharpest tactical minds in the history of tennis, has diagnosed exactly what's going wrong. Brad Gilbert, the legendary coach who has guided multiple champions to Grand Slam glory. The man who wrote the book on winning ugly. The tactical genius who can watch 30 seconds of a match and tell you exactly what's happening and what needs to change, took to social media to deliver a diagnosis that is both catchy and absolutely devastating. The fear hand, to me, is a major issue in a lot of her losses lately, Gilbert wrote, and that term, fear hand, immediately went viral. It's brutal. It's clever. It's the kind of punchy analysis that makes you wince because you know it's accurate. Gilbert continued, it's becoming spinny, passive, and error-prone when the heat is on. She really can't do anything aggressive, and I think a lot of the players now know that. This is surgical precision in his analysis. He's not just saying Andreeva's forehand has some technical issues. He's saying it has become a weapon for her opponents. He's saying the word has spread through the locker room. He's saying every player Andreeva faces now knows exactly where to attack her. This is the nightmare scenario for any professional athlete. The moment when your weakness becomes common knowledge. When you first burst onto the scene, you win on pure talent and the element of surprise. Opponents haven't studied you yet. They don't know your patterns. They haven't figured out how to neutralize your strengths or exploit your weaknesses. You get free wins just because people don't have the scouting report yet. But eventually, inevitably, the locker room figures you out. The coaches compile video. The players compare notes. The patterns emerge. And suddenly everyone knows that if you attack Andreeva's forehand in pressure moments, if you make her hit it when she's tight, when the match is on the line, when the crowd is loud and the stakes are high, it's going to break down. Against Svitolina, who is one of the smartest players on tour, someone who makes her living by exploiting opponents' weaknesses and never giving away free points, Andreeva looked completely lost. The statistics tell the story. She won only 59% of her first serve points. That's abysmal. That's unacceptable for someone with her talent and ranking. She couldn't dictate play. She couldn't impose her game. She was reacting instead of creating. She was defending instead of attacking. She was playing not to lose rather than playing to win. And the fear hand was at the center of all of it. But here's what makes this so much more than just a technical problem. The fear hand isn't just about stroke mechanics or grip or swing path. It's psychological. It's the hesitation that creeps into your mind when you realize the entire world is watching and expecting perfection. It's the doubt that whispers in your ear when you're about to pull the trigger on a forehand down the line. It's the fear, yes, fear, that you might miss, that you might disappoint, that you might prove all those people who said you were overhyped were right all along. And once that fear takes root, once it becomes part of your internal dialogue, it's incredibly difficult to remove. Gilbert's warning was stark and direct. That has got to be fixed in the short term, or it's going to be tough for her to make a deep run. Short term, not long term. Not, eventually she'll figure it out. Short term, as in immediately, as in this is urgent. Because tennis is a sport with a notoriously narrow window of opportunity. Andreeva has achieved more at 18 than most players achieve in their entire careers. World number 5 ranking, multiple prestigious titles, millions of dollars in prize money. But here's the brutal truth about professional tennis. None of that matters if you can't evolve. The sport demands constant adaptation. What worked last year won't work this year. The tactics that brought you success become the tactics opponents study and counter. If you don't fix your weaknesses, if you don't shore up the cracks in your game, the narrative shifts faster than you can possibly imagine. Right now, Andreeva is at a crossroads. She can either accept Gilbert's diagnosis, do the hard work of rebuilding her forehand from the ground up, address the mental components that have turned a weapon into a liability, and come back stronger. Or she can deny the problem, insist that it's just a rough patch, convince herself that her talent alone will be enough, and watch her rankings slowly slide as more and more players figure out exactly how to beat her. Tennis history is littered with prodigies who couldn't make that leap, who couldn't solve the problems that emerged once the locker room figured them out. The difference between a career-long champion and a cautionary tale often comes down to this exact moment: the willingness to admit something is broken and to do whatever it takes to fix it. The pressure on Andreeva right now is immense. She's 18 years old. She should be worrying about college applications and first relationships and figuring out who she is as a person. Instead, she's dealing with the weight of an entire nation's expectations, the pressure of sponsorship deals worth millions, the constant scrutiny of a global media that builds you up just to tear you down, and now the very public diagnosis that her signature shot has become a liability. That's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone a teenager. Some players thrive under that kind of pressure. They use it as motivation. They turn adversity into fuel. Others crumble. They let the doubt consume them. They lose confidence, which leads to worse results, which leads to more doubt, and the spiral continues until suddenly you're no longer a top 10 player. Which version of Mira Andreeva will we see over the next several months? Can she fix the fear hand? Can she rebuild her confidence? Can she prove that she really is the generational talent everyone thought she was? Or will this be the beginning of a slow fade, a gradual decline from Prodigy to just another good player, another remember when story? The answers to these questions will define her career. And based on Brad Gilbert's assessment, we're going to find out very soon. On one level, we have Aryna Sabalenka positioning herself as the matriarch of the tour, the wise elder who has been through the wars and is now using her platform to protect the next generation. Her defense of Ila wasn't just about one specific incident. It was a statement about the kind of leader she wants to be. She's thinking beyond just her own trophy count and ranking points. She's thinking about legacy. She's thinking about what kind of sport she wants to leave behind when she eventually retires. And she's concluded that a sport where young players are punished for speaking truth to power, where officials can make questionable calls without accountability, where the establishment protects itself at the expense of fairness, that's not a sport she wants to be remembered for accepting. So she spoke up. She took a risk. She potentially damaged some relationships with people in power. And she did it anyway, because she believes it's the right thing to do. On another level, we have Alex Ila emerging not just as a player, but as a cultural force, a movement, a symbol of something much larger than tennis. She's not just winning matches and climbing the rankings, although she's certainly doing that. She's causing stadiums to be overwhelmed. She's forcing world number ones to take public stances. She's inspiring millions of people who had never cared about tennis before to suddenly become passionate fans of the sport. She represents the democratization of tennis, proof that you don't have to come from a traditional tennis powerhouse. You don't have to have endless resources and access to the best coaches and facilities from childhood. You don't have to fit the mold of what a tennis champion is supposed to look like. You can come from the Philippines, a country with virtually no tennis infrastructure, and still compete with the very best in the world. That's powerful. That's inspiring. That's the kind of story that changes sports. Then we have Wang Xinyu representing the counterweight, the established Asian power of China refusing to cede the spotlight without a fight. China has invested billions into sports development over the past few decades. They have world-class training facilities, government-backed programs, a systematic approach to identifying and developing talent. Li Na blazed the trail, becoming Asia's first Grand Slam singles champion and proving that Chinese players could compete at the highest level. Now a new generation of Chinese stars is emerging, and they're not about to quietly accept that the Philippines gets to be the story. Wang is bringing the competition, the edge, the willingness to create rivalry and tension. And you know what? Tennis needs that. Sports need villains. They need conflict. They need reasons for fans to take sides and argue and become emotionally invested. Wang Xinyu might have just volunteered to be the antagonist in this story, and that's going to make her very rich and very famous, even if half the tennis world now roots against her. And finally, we have Mira Andreeva serving as the reminder that none of this is easy, that talent and potential are fragile things, that even the brightest stars can flicker and fade if they don't tend to their craft with constant vigilance. She's the cautionary tale in a season full of triumph stories. She's the reality check when everyone else seems to be riding high. And maybe that's the most important story of all, because it keeps everyone grounded. It reminds us that for every Cinderella story, there are a dozen players struggling with demons we can't see from the outside. What we're watching unfold in 2026 is a WTA tour that looks fundamentally different from anything we've seen before. The script is being rewritten. The old hierarchies are being challenged. The barriers between players and fans are breaking down. Social media has given everyone a voice and a platform. Athletes are no longer content to just shut up and play. They want to have opinions. They want to speak out about injustice. They want to use their platforms for more than just selling sneakers and sports drinks. And most importantly, they're willing to support each other in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Sabalenka says Ila isn't wrong. That's a statement about integrity and fairness. Wang says her fans are better. That's a statement about competition and pride. Gilbert says Andreeva's forehand has become a fear hand. That's a statement about the brutal honesty required to compete at the highest levels. Each of these statements, on their own, would be interesting. Together, they paint a picture of a sport in flux, a sport wrestling with questions about fairness and representation and what it means to be a champion in the modern era. The real question, the only question that matters, is what happens next. Does Sabalenka's intervention actually lead to meaningful change in how officials treat young players? Or does it just make for good headlines before everything returns to normal? Does the Ila-Wang rivalry develop into something truly special? The kind of competitive fire that elevates both players and creates moments we'll remember for decades? Or does it fizzle out in petty social media drama? Does Andreeva fix her fear hand, and return to the trajectory everyone expected? Or does she become another example of potential unfulfilled?
I said it many, many times. Nobody in this world, Russian athletes or Belarusian athletes, support the war. Nobody. How can we support the war? Nobody. No.
Alex, after a terrific year last year, how does it feel to be making your main draw debut at Melbourne?
It feels great. I'm super excited. Kamusta mga kapong Pinoy? Surprise! Excited na akong imbitahin kayong lahat na manood sa mga laban ko sa Mubadala Abu